Welcome to this segment of Spirit at Work. Today, our guest is Dr. Terry Gordon, who is a retired cardiologist, also currently an author, a motivational speaker. You'll wear a lot of hats. Good to have you here today.
Thank you. Nice to be here, Father.
Well, hey, I want to ask you, I know that your background, your undergraduate was in psychology, then you went on into medicine, and now in this program we talk a lot about spirituality, and I know that's a particular focus that you have. How do you bring all that together? Psychology, science, spirituality. How did you get interested in that, and what influenced you?
Well, Father, I graduated from Emory University with a degree in psychology, and I have to be honest, I went into that educational program not knowing what I was going to do with it.
Okay.
And I came out of it not knowing what I was going to do with it. But what I came to appreciate is the marvelous organ that the brain is. The mind in particular, you know, it has such potential for creativity, for innovativeness, but it also has the potential to be very destructive. Mm-hmm. My good friend Dr. Wayne Dyer often says, so as you think, so shall you be. And it's so true that the thoughts that we have that bang around inside our head can become our reality. So you have to be very careful of what it is that you allow yourself to think about. And the mind often can be very chaotic and ever-changing, worrying. Medical science, and I've always been intrigued with medical science since I was the age of 7, also is ever-changing. You know, the truths that we hold to be absolute become obsolete with technological innovation that gives us new truths. But the one constant is spiritual truth. And what I learned is that it became the glue holding everything else together. So amalgamating the three, psychology, the thought process, medical science, and all it has to offer, and the spiritual realm is just a perfect mix.
And let me ask you this, was there any life experience that shaped you in terms of really bringing that spiritual dimension to the fore in your life?
Well, there have been several. I've been blessed with a number of people that have crossed my path at just the right time, or circumstances. Perhaps the greatest event shaping my spiritual journey. We were on a vacation down at Lake Mohawk, and I was out pulling weeds, and my wife Angela had left to go to the grocery store. And about 5 minutes away from where we were living, a man had a cardiac arrest, and she pulled up to this cardiac arrest. And she forgot the phone number of our cabin. And she called my name out. And I actually heard her call my name from 5 miles away.
Oh, yeah.
And it was one of those events that it was like God saying, okay, pay attention. There's something here that you have not placed your attention on up to this point. And it changed the whole way that I look at life. Where I was a scientist. You know, you got to prove it to me. If you prove it to me, then I'm going to believe it. I changed the whole paradigm of thought from I'll believe it when I see it to I'll see it when I believe it. And so it set me off on a totally different path, and it made me become much more aware of the spiritual aspect of life, which was there all along. I just hadn't opened my eyes to it. I didn't put up the antenna.
Well, you mentioned other people in medical science. Probably at least some folks, some of your peers might say, oh, spirituality, what are you bringing that in? That's not, like you said, provable. Did you ever get challenged on this by peers or by patients about going in the spiritual direction? And if you did, how'd you respond?
I'm sure there were some that did. You know, when I first went into practice, and after this event that I just described to you, I dabbled a little bit in it. You know, I didn't know if it was my position to do that, if I should, you know, because the patient-doctor relationship is a very important one. And so I would kind of throw little morsels out, and if someone bit on it, and you know, then it would open up the possibility for me to talk a little bit more. There was one individual in particular, because there are certain people that don't want to hear it at all.
Yes.
And you know, you don't force it on anybody.
Sure.
This was a biker dude.
Yeah.
He, you know, tattoos, body piercings, and he came in with a major heart attack. And it was, I mean, he almost died from it. And this man was so angry. I mean, he was just ticked the whole time. And the day before he was to leave the hospital, I was to sit and talk with him about behavior modification, things he needed to do, stop smoking, and stress was one of those. And he just had this glare coming out of his eyes when I walked into his room. And I started to share with him some of my spiritual journey, and I thought, you know, he's not going to be receptive, and so I left his room. And I'm walking down the hall, and about halfway down the hall, I realized, Terry, you just were very judgmental. And I turned around, went back into his room, plopped down on, and I started talking to him about the spiritual journey that I was on. And perhaps the most influential person in this, besides my wife Angela, who's gently coaxed me onto the spiritual path, has been Dr. Wayne Dyer. And so I started talking to this guy about Wayne Dyer. And he very gruffly said, well, why are you talking about this guy? And I went on and shared a little bit more, and then I noticed a little tear kind of build up in his eye. And he said, look in that knapsack over there. And he had this beaten up leather knapsack, and I opened it up, and there were 2 books in there by Wayne Dyer.
Wow.
And I'm thinking, here's a guy that I thought, in my judgment, wouldn't be interested, and yet he was seeking out, he was searching. And what I've found in my life and my career is that there are so many people that are in search of truth and of peace. And so,
you mentioned that peace. What are other benefits for somebody, for patients, for example, of if you're encouraging of the spiritual side? What do you tell them? Hey, you know, if you tap into this, this is some of the good things that can come forth.
Well, I would answer that in 2 ways. Number one, that as I mentioned, there's so many people that are in search, that, especially in today's world of turmoil. But an epiphany occurred to me, and it came through a movie, believe it or not. You know, I went to medical school, trained at Akron General in internal medicine, went up to the Mecca, the Cleveland Clinic, and trained in cardiology. And, you know, we came out of those programs thinking, you know, beating our chest that we can do just about anything. You know, if we can think it, we can do it. In the City of Angels, there's a cardiovascular surgeon. And she's kind of a hard individual. And she's in the operating room, and she loses a patient. And she's blaming everybody else in the room for mistakes that they may have made. And she storms out of the room as she's pulling off her gloves. And she ends up in a stairwell, crying. And she's sobbing, and she's saying, you know, I've done this operation 1,000 times. Why did this patient die? And she couldn't see it, but her guardian angel was there, and he places his hand on her head, and she comes to the realization that she's not in control. And so what I've learned is that I'm not in control. I'm a tool. Physicians are a tool to healing. Healing doesn't occur in the physical realm. Healing occurs in the spiritual realm. And my whole professional career, I just assumed that I was the one that was healing. You know, that I was the healer. I'm not the healer. I'm just the tool that the healer uses to heal.
In what other ways has your own spiritual journey benefited you in addition to the way you practice medicine?
It has opened up so many possibilities. You know, I go by the mantra, be open to everything, attached to nothing. Now that doesn't mean that you accept everything that you hear, you certainly shouldn't, but if you are open to the possibilities are vast, and every step of the way in my life, since I've opened up my heart and soul, has continued to expand and grow and evolve.
Let me ask this too. You're working with hospitals. Are hospitals more open as institutions to the healing dimension for doctors and for programs they offer the general public?
I think they want to be. You know, in today's circumstance, nobody has time. You know, we're just so busy doing things, and there are a lot of other constraints on physicians, on nurses. It's sad. I think there's not enough of that. And I also believe, you know, from the physician's perspective, that either we don't have the time to contemplate that aspect or don't want to. I know for me, you know, in the middle of a code blue, you know, you have to become very focused on what's right there.
Yes.
And I have observed literally thousands of people as they die. But usually I'm so immersed in trying to keep them from doing so that I don't and hadn't concentrated on what was really happening at that precise moment of transition. There was this lady I took care of. Her name was Audrey, and she had one of the original implantable defibrillators.
Yes.
Beautiful lady from the South. We had a great relationship. And she came in one day, and this defibrillator was just banging away at her. It shocked her probably 80 times in the day, and she was unfortunately wide awake. And so at the end of the day, despite my efforts to stop it, I couldn't. She called me into the room and she said, "You know, Terry, I'm not afraid to die, but I don't want to go through this anymore. Will you turn the device off?" And I said, "Audrey, of course I will, but you understand that the next time you have this heart rhythm disturbance, you're going to cross over." And she said, "I understand that." So I started to walk out of the room, and she said, "I just have one other request. Will you hold my hand?"
Wow.
And I said, "Of course I will." So I sat on her bed, and I'm holding her hand. We're talking about the South. And about halfway through a sentence, I could see the monitor over her shoulder. She went into ventricular fibrillation where the heart just started to quiver, and she very peacefully crossed. And as she did so, she lost her bladder control. And I'm now sitting in a pool of her urine, holding her hand. But I couldn't move. It was such a special moment. And I'm looking at her hand, and it's the same hand that I had been holding before. It had the same blood cells, the same electrolytes. Everything was the same, except for one thing. The spirit had left the vessel. And in that split second, Father, I could feel her energy in the room behind me as it swirled, and then it was gone. And I came back and looked at that hand again, and the weirdest thought crossed my mind. It was another movie. And the movie was E.T. And do you remember when E.T.'s bony finger leans over and touched the flower, and ding, the flower withered? And then he touched it again and it came back to life. It hit me. God had just dinged her. Now, we think we know so much in medicine and science. We really don't know squat in the overall scheme of things. But the one thing we do know is that energy doesn't die. It transforms. So from the moment that she was dinged, that energy promulgates out into the universe and is there for eternity. Now, I had never allowed myself the time to contemplate that until everything came together at that very, very, very special moment in my life as her life was transitioning.
As we're moving along here, a question I want to ask you. What spiritual principles for you are foundational that you'd like even new people in medicine to be aware of, that you'd say, hey, here's, or anybody, here's 2 or 3 spiritual principles to live your life by, you'll be more enriched?
I think they're all the same, and that is peace, peace, peace. You know, we're always striving for happiness. You know, we're always striving for fulfillment. We're always egoically looking to acquire things that are going to make us happy. We're all striving for the same thing, and that is shalom, salam, peace. And the peace is not out there. The door to peace opens inward. And the peace is already there. It's just a matter of finding it, locating it, and appreciating it. It's God-given, and it's been there all along, and it will always be there. It's just often, unfortunately, it gets covered by stuff.
Yeah, tap into what's already there.
Bingo.
Finally, let me ask you, difference you hope to continue making? I know you're doing speaking, wrote a book, so forth. What difference do you hope to continue doing now that you're retired in terms of your medical career?
Well, I have a book coming out in July, going to be published by Hay House. The title of the book is No Storm Lasts Forever. And it's about a spiritual journey that I've been on involving specifically our son Tyler, who was involved in a car accident. My goal, if you will, my purpose, dharma in life, is to continue what I've been doing up to this point, and that is serving others. And my hope is to spread the message of the insight that I have gained. I'm not enlightened, but I've been given glimpses of what it may be. So my hope is to be able to share that sort of message. My mantra in life is to give myself away every day. It has been when I was in the practice of cardiology, and it will continue to be so.
Well, thank you for giving yourself today in this interview. This has been fascinating and something worth all of us reflecting on. I'll be back in a moment for a closing segment. Welcome back to this closing segment of Spirit at Work. Normally, Larry Villeman, my co-host, and I speak a little bit and offer some final reflections upon our guest. Larry couldn't be here today, so you're stuck with me. It certainly has been great talking to Dr. Terry Gordon. I've come to know him more in the last year, and I'm sure for all of us there's a richness in what he had to say that is worth all of us reflecting on, whatever our profession. You know, in this program we talk about the spirituality of all of life. Obviously, Terry gave us a rich understanding of spirituality tied in with medicine, all tied in with the healing of the whole person, and recognizing that part of that healing, which is needed in our planet today, in our families, in our cultures, and in ourselves, is a deep, abiding sense of peace. And we're reminded that at the core of that peace, whatever we're dealing with physically, emotionally, mentally, is a strong spiritual foundation that gives, as you can see, it gives Terry a deeper meaning and purpose to who we are and to what we do and to how we do it. Today, maybe all of us can reflect a little bit more on our own situation in life, hopefully recognize how the spiritual component is not just one more component, but an essential foundation to us all. I know that this is Terry's wish and prayer, and mine too, and Larry's on this program, that we would all breathe deeply, recognize the Spirit in our midst, tap into that presence, and as Terry said too, have that purpose of each of us spending our life to bring a little more love and goodness to the world, a little more health and peace to humankind. I hope to see you again at our next segment of Spirit at Work.